The unexpected connection, a story of forbidden bonds. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow throughout the sheer curtains of my bedroom. Lay on the bed, my long hair cascading over my shoulders as the quiet hum of evening settled around me. It was a rare moment of peace after a long day off managing the household and tending toneless responsibilities. This was my time to unwind, my time to simplify. I heard their footsteps echoing softly down the hallway. It was Jackson, me 20-year-old stepson, returning from his late afternoon. Ron. His energy was palpable even from a distance. The door to my room was slightly ajar, and I caught a glimpse of his silhouette as he approached. "Hey, Christina," he called out softly, his voice hesitant. "Are you okay?" Startled, I opened my eyes and looked toward him. For a moment, I forgot how I must have looked relaxed, vulnerable, and not entirely presentable in my tank top and shorts. A hint of embarrassment rose to my cheeks, but I smiled, masking my discomfort. "I'm fine," I replied, sitting up slightly, just taking a moment for Hess. Stepped into the room cautiously, his gaze flickering toward me before quickly offering, "I thought I'd check on you," he said, his tone casual, though there was a nervous energy about him. "That's sweet of you," I said, motioning toward the chair near my bed. "Sit." For a moment, he hesitated, but eventually moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. Instead, we exchanged pleasantries, and I noticed that the way his eyes lingered on me, curious, searching, unsure. There was an unspoken tension in the air, something I couldn't quite place but couldn't ignore. Either, I began, my voice softer now. I'm glad we've grown closer these past few months." He nodded, a faint smile of appearing on his lips. "Yeah, me too. I never thought we'd bond like this." It was true. When Robert and I get married, Jackson had been distant, almost cold. Adjusting to our new family dynamic hadn't been easy for either of us, but slowly we'd found common ground. Still, this moment felt different, charged with something I couldn't define. "Sometimes the most unexpected relationships end up being the most meaningful," I said, leaning back against the headboard as it stretched. I saw him glance at me with a fleeting look that was quickly replaced by guilt. "Do you ever think about how strange life can be?" he asked suddenly, tone contemplative. "All the time," I replied with a chuckle, "like how I used to think of you as just my stepson, and no, well, now you feel like more than that." He froze for a moment, his brow furrowing. "More than just a stepson," he repeated, his voice barely above whispery. Smiled teasingly, raising an eyebrow. "You're easy to talk to, and you make me feel understood. Not everyone does." His expression softened, and for a moment Wes sat in silence, the air between us thick with unspoken words. I could feel his eyes on me, and when I looked at him there was something in his gaze that made my heart skip a beat. "Can I ask you something?" he blurted out, his voice hesitant. "Of course," I said, sitting up straighter. "What's on your mind? What do you think of you about me?" he asked, his tone serious now. I paused, considering his question carefully. "I think you're an incredible young man," I said. "Find you're a smart kind, and you've grown so much." I admire that. He looked down, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different?" I frowned slightly, unsure of what he meant. "Different? How but different? How he said cautiously. "If we weren't the stepmother and stepson." The weight of his words hung heavily on the air, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. I studied his face, searching for some hint of what he was thinking. "You're young," I said softly, choosing my words carefully, "but I think it's natural to feel a connection with someone you spend so much time with, so you do think about it." He pressed his voice barely above. I whisper, I hesitate, biting my anticipation that we don't have much time. He said, his voice low, but urgent. I smiled, unable to hide the excitement bubbling inside me. "Then we'd better make the most of it." He crossed the room in a few quick strides, his hands finding my waist as he pulled mine to a kiss that left me breathless. The world seemed to melt away as we sank into the couch, our connection more intense than ever. Before every touch, every whispered word felt like a promise, a vow to hold on to what we had no matter what. But as the hours ticked by and the sound of Robert's car pulling into the driveway shattered our moment of intimacy, reality came crashing back, and we scrambled to compose ourselves as thrill of almost being caught leaving us both breathless and flushed that night. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of our situation pressed down to me. What we were doing was dangerous, not just for use but for the fragile balance of our family. And yet the thought of ending it off, losing the connection we had, felt unbearable. The next morning, Jackson found me in the kitchen, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, and nodded, setting down my coffee, the cup. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. "I can't keep sneaking around like this. I want more, Christina. You want us to be real." My heart acted his words, the sincerity in his voice cutting through me. "I want that too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But what about Robert? What about everything Weston to L. Jackson reached out taking my hand? And we'll figure it out together. Determination and his gaze gave me strength. And for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I didn't have to hide, where we could be honest about what we meant to each other. It was a danger fantasy, but it was one I couldn't let go that evening as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast its golden light across the house. Jackson and I shared a quiet moment in the backyard. The world around us felt still, as if holding its breath, and in that silence, I knew what I had to do. "We can't keep living like this," he said, my voice firm but gentle. "We need to make a choice." Jackson nodded, his expression serious. "I choose you," he said without hesitation. "I'll always choose you." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached out for his hand, feeling the strength of his grip. "Then we take it one step at a time," I said, echoing his earlier words. "No matter what happens," he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that felt like a promise, a declaration of everything we'd been too afraid to say at that moment. The risks and consequences faded away, leaving only the certainty of what we felt for each other. As the night deepened and the stars lit up the sky, we held each other close, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Of our journey was far from over, but for the first time we weren't afraid of what was to come. Together we could weather any storm as long as we had each other. And so, with hearts full of hope and a bond that refused to be broken, we stepped into the unknown, ready to write the next chapter of our story together. At one point, our hands brushed as we reached for the same book. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as Arise met the intensity in his gaze. My pulse quickened, and I found myself stepping closer. "Without thinking, what can," I murmured, though my voice lacked a conviction. "What if we want to heck?" Honored his tone low and steady, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world, made my resolve crumble. "I do want to," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "But what about your father?" "He doesn't have to know," Jackson said, his determination unwavering. "We'll careful of the thought of Robert finding out," sent a jolt of fear through him. But the pull I felt toward Jackson was stronger than any sense of logic against my better judgment. I closed the distance between us, my lips meeting his in a kiss that was as intoxicating as it was forbidden. The room seemed to shrink around us as we lost ourselves in the moment, our connection deepening with every touch. Just as the kiss grew more fervent, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the spell. I pulled back quickly, my heart pounding. Gas. Panic surged through me. "What if Heckams?" and I whispered, my voice trembling. "Then we act normal," Jackson replied, his confidence studying me. "We can handle this." The front door opened, and Wes stepped apart, quickly arranging gorselves as though nothing had happened. Robert entered the room, oblivious to the tension that lingered in the air. "What are you two up to?" he asked, glancing between us. "Just tidying up," I said, forcing a smile. My heart raced as Jackson nodded in agreement, his expression perfectly composed. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but thrill of nearly being caught left me feeling more alive than I had in years. Later that night, as the house fell silent, I found myself standing outside Jackson's door, my hand hovered over the handle, my thoughts soaring with my emotions. Finally, I knocked softly. "Can I come in?" I asked, my voice barely audibly. His reply was immediate, "Of course." I stepped inside, the dim light casting a warm glow over the room. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, and the look in his eyes sent a rush of warmth through. I couldn't stop thinking about today, I confessed, closing the door behind me. "Me neither," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "It felt amazing to be together like that." I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "What if someone finds out?" I asked, through the thrill of the thought only heightened my anticipation. "Then we'll deal with it." Hesita's gaze steady and resumed, "I just can't keep pretending that I don't want this." Words ignited something within me, and before I could second guessing the self, I closed the distance between us, capturing his lips in a kiss that was filled with urgency and passion, and that meant nothing else mattered but the connection we shared, the bond that grew stronger with every stolen moment. As the night wore on, we found solace in each other's arms. The world outside fading away, it was dangerous, reckless, and utterly intoxicating, and neither of us wanted it to end. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and unspoken promises. Jackson and I found ourselves navigating this uncharted territory with a mixture of caution and reckless abandon. Every glance, every touch carried the weight of what we were risking, but it also made everything feel more alive, more real. The secret westward bound us together in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. On evening, Robert announced he'd be working late again, leaving Jackson and I alone in the house. The opportunity was too tempting to ignore, and as soon as the front door closed behind him, Jackson appeared in the living room, his eyes bright with lip. "I think it's complicated." The room felt smaller, heavier as we sat there, both of us lost in our thoughts. Then, as if drawn by an invisible force, he reached out his hand. Brushing against mine, I just can't help but feel that there's something more between us, he said, his voice trembling with vulnerability. Before I could overthink it, I leaned closer, closing the gap between us. Our lips met in a tentative kiss, soft and fleeting, but enough to send a jolt of electricity through my entire body. When we pulled away, breathless, I saw a mixture of fear and exhilaration in his eyes. What now? I asked, my voice barely above whisper. No, said with a confident smile spreading across his face. We take this one step at a time. The kiss we shared lingered and mimicked. Long after Jackson left the room, my heart was still racing, my thoughts swirling. In a mix of guilt and undeniable curiosity, the silence that followed was electric, thick with unspoken tension, and I couldn't shake feeling that something between us had shifted irrevocably. Jackson's words echoed in my mind. If you're not comfortable, we won't do anything, but I can't hide how I feel. His honesty struck a chord deep within me, and for the first time, I felt seen in the way I hadn't in years. The following we fell into an unspoken rhythm. Robert, my husband, was busy with work, his late nights, leaving the house quiet and offering us space to explore this newfound connection. Every glance Jackson and I exchanged carried away a silent question that neither of us dared. Tones were allowed. That tension built with every passing day, and by the time the weekend arrived, I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep dancing around the inevitable. One evening, Robert left for a business trip, giving us the freedom when it realized we craved. Jackson found in the living room, curled up with a book. He leaned casually against the doorframe, his eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and something deeper. Hey, Hesed, his voice soft. Wanna watch a movie? The idea was innocent enough, but way his gaze lingered on me sent a shiver through my body. I nodded, closing book and gesturing for him to pick something. We settled on the couch, the movie playing in the background as we sat side by side. At first it was Sinis's shoulder brushing against mine, his laugh filling the room during a particularly funny scene. But as the minutes pet our hands found each other, fingers tended actively intertwining, my heart pounded in my chest, and I turned to look at him. My voice barely above whispered, do you think this is a good idea? His expression softened, but there was a fire in his eyes I couldn't ignore. Don't know if he admitted, his voice raw with honesty, but I do know how I feel about you. I swallowed hard, my thought racing as he leaned closer to his lips, brushing against mine in a kiss that was soft, yet full of unspoken promises. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us and the electric connection we shared. When we finally pulled away, breathless, I searched his face for answers to questions I wasn't ready to ask. What now? He whispered, his lips curved into a confident smile. Now we take this one step at a time. The days that followed were a whirlwind of stolen glances and quiet moments. We grew bolder, testing the boundaries of our secret connection while raw with honesty. But I do know how I feel about you. I swallowed hard, my thought racing as he leaned closer to his lips, brushing against mine in a kiss that was soft, yet full of unspoken promises. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us and the electric connection we shared. When we finally pulled away, breathless, I searched his face for answers to questions I wasn't ready to ask. What now? He whispered, his lips curved into a confident smile. Now we take this one step at a time. The days that followed were a whirlwind of stolen glances and quiet moments. We grew bolder, testing the boundaries of our secret connection while